We're going to call this meeting to order. It is approximately 11:04. I'm sorry. Yeah. No, 11:08. I don't know. Anyway, this is the Tennessee Inmate Disciplinary Oversight Board. I'm Vanessa Murtaugh, I'm the chair. We are in the Tennessee room or Nashville room in Tennessee Towers. At this time, we're going to, let's just go ahead and let's start with a roll call. I want to recognize all board members that are here in the building. We have one member that will be jumping in and out virtually in the Teams meeting. I know we have two guests in the Teams meeting as well. So I want to recognize them. I don't have a name, just phone numbers. So yeah, if we can go ahead and just do roll call, starting with you, Mr. Dunn.
Brad.
Betsy Wiseman, present.
Lee Frank, present.
Jerry Bassbinder, present.
Mary Carpos, present.
Vanessa Murtaugh, chair, present. We do have a quorum, so we will continue with our meeting. Mr. Lindsay was supposed to do our opening prayer, however, he is not here. So if Mr. Dunn, if you could get us started.
Yes, ma'am. Let's pray, shall we? Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the time you've given us together today. Thank you for all of these board members and the talents we represent. We want to especially pray for our colleague who could not be here with us physically today, as he is officiating a service for a lost loved one. And we offer our condolences, thoughts, and prayers, and ask you to strengthen him and his family, Father, as he does what he needs to do. And we ask for traveling mercies for he and his family, and bring them back safely with a peace that passes all understanding according to your word. Would you bless our efforts today, Father? Would you help us to be productive? Would you help us to remember our cause and justice at the center of everything we do, justice for our citizens, justice for our victims, justice for our offenders. And would you bless our governor this day? Would you bless our lieutenant governor? Would you bless our Speaker of the House? And would you bless the Tennessee General Assembly as they continue to press on toward the goal of productive things for our state? We ask you to give them wisdom and protect them and their families from ill and harm. We dedicate this time to you, and in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I'm sorry, Mr. Stahl, if you can pick it up.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Appreciate it. Thank everybody for being here. The first thing I'd like to do before we get to the review and approval of minutes, which is the first item on our agenda, is if we could have the outside participants introduce themselves. I think we'd all really appreciate that. I see that there's two numbers on the screen, and I don't have names attached to those. It's a 423 number and a 931 number. If the 423 number would be willing to introduce themselves, I know the rest of the board would appreciate that. And trying to unmute you. Well, I see that the 931 number is unmuted. Ma'am or sir, do you want to introduce yourself quickly to the rest of the board? Okay, we can't hear you, but if you, I'll leave you unmuted. If you figure out maybe some audio issues, we'd be happy to recognize you a little bit later in the meeting. And the same goes for whoever is calling in from the 423 number. Feel free to jump on the audio here and just introduce yourself, and we'd love to help you out with anything we can at the end of the meeting when we do our public comment. On that note, we will begin the agenda. We have a lengthy agenda today. I hope we can get through the brunt of it fairly quickly. The first item on the agenda is review and approval of minutes from our last public meeting on June 12th. I believe those have been previously distributed to the board members. We will take a vote on approval for those previous minutes. They have also, the video for that has also been posted on the IDOB YouTube page for anyone who would like to watch that last meeting. So I'll open it up if there's any issues with the minutes that we need to address. Happy to address those. If I don't hear any issues, I will ask for a vote on approval. Okay, I don't see any hands from anyone with any issues. So all those in favor of approving the minutes from the June 12th public meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Okay, the ayes have it. That motion is passed. The previous minutes from June 12th, 2024 public meeting have been approved. The next item on the agenda is the Roles and Responsibilities Subcommittee draft, which should be included in your packets. And it's not the first item in your packet. If you go into the packet a little bit, you'll see it toward the back, and it begins with it's got the Tennessee logo on it and the seal in the upper right corner, and that's the first page of the Roles and Responsibilities Subcommittee draft. Now, this has been previously distributed. I hope everyone has had a chance to take a look at it. But essentially, this is the draft that the subcommittee consisting of Lee Frank, Jerry Vassbinder, and Mike Dunn, with contribution from the rest of the board, were able to put together. And it defines the specific roles and responsibilities assigned to the following jobs. The board chair, the board vice chair, individual board members, subcommittee chairs, and that's it. So the draft was, like I said, previously distributed, and hopefully everyone had a chance to take a look at it. I'd like to hear from everybody on their thoughts on that draft, changes that they'd like to make. If we get to the point today where we feel like the draft can be voted on and approved, that would be even better. But at this point, I'll open it up and we can just talk a little bit about that draft and what people like about it, what they don't like about it, or any changes they'd like to make to it. Anyone?
I'll start.
Okay.
Under board chair in the statute, it's a 2-year time limit.
Okay.
So it says in that first paragraph, it says, will not serve under any set time limit. I believe in the statute, it says 2.
Okay, so we'll change that. This role will serve under a 2-year time limit per statute. Is everyone okay with the change to that language? I guess not.
The 2-year term, but no term limit. Oh, that's fair enough.
Okay. Well, the language I'll change it to right now is a 2-year term limit per statutory limitations with no term limit assigned unless that second portion we're not happy with. We don't want to include the term limit language.
I think what the just, I don't know that we need to say per statute, but just a 2-year term, right? A 2-year. How do we say that? Time limit with no, mhm.
2-year term increments.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we can. I opened it up.
Yeah, nobody had any suggestions, so I jumped in with the first suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got something on the first page, we're happy to. Okay, we can do that. Does anyone have anything on the first page? Okay, not hearing any. Does anyone have anything on the second page? Okay. Okay.
It would be my understanding that we're an at-will state. I don't know why our staff would not fall under that. Why would it be different, Dr. Carpos? Procedure. Is it in the statute? I'm sorry, is it in the statute, does he have appointing authority? Does our executive director have appointing authority as per the statute?
Or hiring authority.
So change that to hiring if that's what's in the statute, if everybody's okay with that. And then at the tail end, subject to board notice and Department of Human Resources procedure. If that's okay with the board. Anybody have any other suggestions?
Mhm. It would be my understanding that they would be hired the same way I'm hired as an at-will state employee, unless there's a designation attached to them. So for example, if we were to hire Mr. Baisden under a 120-day contract, and in that contract, there would be something else associated with his termination. But there's no contract for state employees. So when you hire someone, they're an at-will employee. As far as I understand it, there's no contract that does anything else, and they're not appointed, they're hired.
I
So-
think just legally, just to cover CYA, right? Yeah, just put in accordance and
I'm
yeah,
happy to do that.
yeah, just subject to board notice and DOHR procedure, just to cover anything that may arise. Yeah, yeah.
Is
But
that-
I'm with you. I thought we were all at will.
Well, there's there could be procedures associated with that. It depends on internal policies, and it also depends on state law. So obviously, everybody's subject to the proper discrimination laws, for example, protected classes. If you, like I think Mary is alluding to, if you're appointed to a specific position, there could be confines to your employment as an appointee as opposed to just someone who's hired. So for example, if you're appointed by the governor, you might have a contract or a term contract similar to how you all do, and there might be an ethics clause built into that. But for a regular employee, there's not a contract that has an ethics clause built into it, right? So, so there are different circumstances that may be applicable. And I'll let the members who are on the Roles and Responsibilities Subcommittee speak more to this point. But I was in that meeting, and it was my understanding that we were talking about people who might be hired by the executive director to just be at-will state employees, hired and fired at the behest of the executive director, and not under any specific appointed type position that would require specific. And we internally don't have a policy that requires specific procedures happen before the termination of somebody. Just like you alluded to, you could fire me anytime. It's not like we've built in a policy that says you have to give me, whatever, 90 days notice, or I have to have a personnel file that says certain things. We don't have that built in. So that's something else the board might want to consider. If they are concerned about termination procedures and they want to build in a policy that has certain requirements, we can do that. But right now we don't have that. So I would think that we can add that language at the end, and then just make sure that if it ever does come to the point that we need to terminate somebody, that we are doing so in accordance with all state law and any other applicable policies that would apply. I think that's fine. Okay. All right, so that is page 2. Is there anything else on page 2 that anyone else had, or Mary, you had? Okay, I'm gonna make those changes. Now we're on to page 3. We talked a little bit about chairperson's suggestion for the first paragraph. We're going to change to 2-year increments. And is there anything else on page 3?
On item number 6, under roles and responsibilities, and by the way, do you see where it says Roman numeral 1 and then 2 and then 3 right next to it?
Yeah, that's
So this is 2, correct?
that's a typo. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So number 6 under 2. So this is appoint 3-person subcommittee to conduct yearly executive director review. I would just like to suggest that not necessarily be an appointment as much as the board's deciding. And that may be different people, different times or whatever.
Can you?
I just wouldn't, all I'm suggesting is that it wouldn't be one person, but it would be the board who would decide who would be conducting the yearly executive director review.
So are you suggesting that we eliminate number 6 and just put that on as an agenda item at some point during the year for the board to take up?
That'd be one way, sure.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Well,
I'm not in agreement with that. I like the way it's written.
you want the way it's
I like the way it's done here, that it's a one, like whoever is sitting as chair says, okay, you and you are gonna do it this year. Or how we've done other subcommittees. Does anybody want to volunteer for it?
Okay.
But the chair would normally appoint create the subcommittee, correct?
But we've had the subcommittees have equal representation from all the appointing authorities.
Well, and we can do that too, but what I'm saying is that how we have been conducting business, and from my understanding, one of the responsibilities of the chair is to create the subcommittees. So if this is another subcommittee and it's just responsible for a yearly review of our executive director, then the chair would need to appoint those people as well. So I don't see any issue with the language.
So we've only had one round of subcommittees, and my understanding is we volunteered for those. We weren't appointed for those.
But at the end of the day, yes, right? Like you agreed, but it was also an appointment. And that was not the first time because I appointed Mr. Vassbinder as to be our liaison to TDOC.
I remember you doing that. That's correct. So do you want to write then in this duties and responsibilities for the chairperson that they have appointing authorities and list what types of appointments they have the authority to make?
No, that's making it a little bit too complicated, Dr. Karpos. Can we move 2.6 to the executive director section and say somewhere in there, be subject to a 3-person subcommittee? I think Dr. Karpos would be much happier with that language and we could move on.
Well, that's one idea. We can move it to the executive director responsibility that they're just subject to it, and then leave it open to an agenda item at some point during the year, and then bring it up for the board to act on when they find appropriate. How does everybody feel about doing that? Okay. Okay. All right. So that's what I will do. I will move.
I would like to make one point.
Yeah.
I'm not unhappy. Just because I'm bringing up or expressing a point of view is not expressing unhappiness. So I just want to be clear with you, Mr. Stahl,
100%.
that I'm not unhappy
100%.
with what you've written here or how
Oh,
this was
no,
arrived
I
at.
don't.
But I would like to express a point of view. Thank
Sure.
you.
No, I think it's helpful to hear from everybody. So that's good. And that makes things better. We can move that to the executive director's portion of the roles and responsibilities draft, and then we'll have the board take it up at a appropriate time. And we'll just eliminate number 6. All right. Anything else on page 3? I think we're on page 4. Any issues on page 4 we'd like to address? Okay, page 5. Anyone?
Where we talked about where the executive director would step in and appoint members if, do you remember us having this conversation, Jerry? Do you remember us having that? If it came down to the end, was that in there? Like if we couldn't get people to volunteer for boards, you would say, I need you to do this. Do you remember us having this conversation? I didn't know if it was in there. Do you remember this, Jerry? Remember, Mike? I'm sorry, I just was looking for it. Okay.
Looks like it says set meeting agendas and appoint members of the board as necessary to board projects and committees.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay?
There we go.
Okay, good deal. All right, we are on page 5. No issues, I don't think. And the final page, page 6.
I did have a question on page 6, number 12.
Yeah.
Board members shall confer and coordinate with the executive director prior to making or crafting public statements or comments about official board business or actions. And just to clarify, when you say public statements, do you mean media? Statements to the media?
I'll let the members of the subcommittee talk more about that, but that was my understanding, more along those lines, sort of official statements to either to the media or to legislatures or somebody with some type of official action, not to obviously friends and family or anything like that, but anything that could be reviewed, I guess, or considered an official statement of the board.
So you're not
But again, I'll let
thinking,
the
or
members,
the
yeah, let me let the
committee
members.
is not thinking that this includes any sorts of conversations, or for instance, Reverend Lindsay isn't here today. Reverend Lindsay speaks to congregates, both pulpit and constituents apart from that. So this wouldn't be construed as he would need to confer and get approved talking points or remarks that were okay for him to say or not okay to say from the pulpit or to his congregants.
Gentlemen, if I remember right from our meeting, it was more, this was addressing official statements, decisions of the board. If we're asked out of context about an official point or official direction of the board, not surface chatter, how's it going, blah, 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 especially by a legislator or something like that. They're just checking up on us, checking up with us type thing. But this was more of we geared it thinking in advance of an official statement. The board has decided to, as of such a date, blah, blah, blah. That's what we were discussing,
Right.
if I remember correctly. So it's, we're not going to be reprimanded for surface chatter. Yeah, we're doing fine. We're moving along and, discussing things with friends, family, or members of the state legislature.
If I could just weigh in, I think to Mr. Dunn's point, I think we should all be able to differentiate between I'm having conversation about what I do or what we are doing and locking us into a commitment or a particular polarized position, right? So, and those, I think that's, I want to say more professional common sense than I need to run that by Mr. Stahl. I had this thing when I worked with the district attorney's office, if I was going to a function, if I was going to walk in a community thing or show up at a dinner or whatever it was, whatever community event I was doing, I would always run it by the general and say, am I going as Vanessa or am I going as ADA Murtaugh? And then that told me where, like, right? So maybe, because like what you're talking about, Dr. Karpos, with Quantel preaching, or even, right? Don't you also, you're also sometimes, right? Okay. So that to me is, that's a different place. Like that is a public statement, right? Like I think that's a place where he would need to know, like whatever sermon it is you're given today is going to drag that in there, right? Because that is public. You're speaking to a whole group of people. It's not an idle, hey, how's it going? What are y'all up to? Blah, blah, blah kind of thing. So maybe we need to talk about that as in a separate conversation about what constitutes official business and what does not. Outside of this line, because
Yes.
this line to me is very clear,
Absolutely.
but outside of this, what constitutes official business and what does not.
Makes perfect sense. And we also discussed, if I remember right, that what's said in a public meeting is recorded and transcribed and on the public website anyway. So if we're discussing something that's already been discussed in public, it's not a secret. And it's, so whether they've seen it or not. So, but I agree that, if we're going to try to make a representation of the board in a separate setting, we should get the board's blessing or ED's blessing or something like that.
Just
An awareness.
a situational awareness. Hey, Mr. Stahl. Yeah, just a situational awareness, right? Because we are clearly not, most time, we're not asking permission. We're just saying, hey, FYI, I got invited by my local senator to come talk, right? And then we should all, I think, have the capability of representing the board
Yes.
fair, right? Like in a good light.
And we never want our board to be blindsided by, I heard this from so-and-so.
Or, oh, I popped up on the news, right? Like, yeah, no, I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
I was thinking like if Brother Dunn wanted to write an op-ed for his local paper and about what we're doing, probably ought to throw that by. Is this where our board actually is, instead of just one person saying, this is what our board does? And maybe it should be just sent out and make sure that everyone's okay with what's been done. I think that's kind of what we were talking about, wasn't it?
Well, and I think the word crafting leads you into that thought, right? Because where you're crafting a statement, right? You're crafting something, you're writing it, right? That's what that word says to me. I think it's fine.
So I'm still a little unclear, and I want to be real clear that I understand this. So if a board member is making a statement about the board and the board activities versus a board member is making a statement about their activities, which is this relating to? And I'll use myself as an example because I'm a criminologist. I go to criminology association meetings. I present research. I speak on a wide variety of topics. I don't speak about this board per se, but is it possible that someone attending a meeting will say, Dr. Karpos, do you belong to this board? My answer would be yes, I belong to this board. Well, what's this board about? Well, I would refer them to the website, and that's how they know what the board's about. Dr. Karpos, how did you come to be on this board? Well, now I feel like we've stepped into something that I don't need to necessarily craft with an executive director. This is speaking about me in particular, not about the board. Am I following the correct line of reasoning that the subcommittee would follow or the executive director would follow?
I'll say as executive director, I think you are. I don't have any problem with that line of reasoning and that delineation between speaking for the board and speaking for yourself, or even for yourself as a member of the board. I don't,
Right.
I think to Vanessa's point, I think there's a good understanding from just a practical perspective. We obviously can't answer every scenario, here right now, but I think that reasoning is fine. From my perspective, if the subcommittee members have a different point of view, I'll let them speak to that.
Sorry to jump in over you. I think I'll say it again, I think we all have the capability of determining what's appropriate and what's not appropriate to say in a public setting such as that. Like if you were asked those questions, I think we're all intelligent and capable of either avoiding the question because it's not appropriate or answering the question because it is appropriate. And then perhaps afterwards, maybe then letting, just again, for situational awareness, saying, hey, Mr. Stahl, I was at this thing completely unrelated, speaking about what I speak about, criminology, and there was somebody there that clearly knew, asked some very pointed questions, FYI, right? But I think all of us are capable of handling the situation appropriately. So it wouldn't be like, oh no, this happened. It's just, hey, just so you know, I was at this thing and somebody was asking me some questions. They weren't there to ask me criminology questions, because what you're describing is somebody who's specifically wants to talk to you about this board, right? Maybe not perhaps the topic that you were there to talk about. So yeah, again, I trust every single person on this board to be able to look around. I just want to make sure, I really do. I trust every single person on this board. I'm just not looking at myself, to be able to handle that situation maturely and appropriately and professionally. And if the answer needs to be I appreciate your question. However, right, that's not what I'm here to speak about. Right. I mean, you can handle it. I'm sure you can. So then on that case in the back end, perhaps. And again, maybe we need to talk about this as another agenda item, next month. What constitutes official business, or when does a public speaking event turn into official business? Like as a board, we need to agree on when either you need to let him know you're doing it or you need to let him know you did it. I think that needs to be something that's maybe defined. So we're all just comfortable with what we're doing.
Thank you.
Is that helpful, Dr. Carpos?
Yes, absolutely. Just want to clarify, do you want me to submit to you the conferences that I
No.
attend and what I'm speaking?
No.
So I just wanted to be clear on that. I don't want to be less than transparent, but on the other hand, I don't want to burden you either.
Well, why don't we do this? I mean, we can, if you find yourself in a situation where you're going to be presenting or being somewhere, you can let us know. And then, if an issue arises, we'll deal with it.
Well,
Maybe we can put that in the agenda item with deciding what constitutes like, and again, it's not that you would be asking permission to do it, but because we all sit on this board and we're all appointed by, higher up elected officials for the state of Tennessee, I think, when we walk in a room, you represent yourself, you represent what you do as a criminologist, but you also represent this board, right? That you represent the lieutenant governor every time you walk in a room. And so again, it's not asking permission. It's just, hey, I got this thing. So, and we can discuss that when we discuss this other stuff, but let's talk about that for the next public meeting.
I would just like to ensure that all members have a format and a understanding of how to notify, because all members do speak. I just happen to have used myself as an example, but all members do speak. And just to be sure that, to use Vanessa's term, situational awareness, that we all know who's speaking to whom.
And I think that's the point of that subpoint is just to keep that alive for the purpose of everyone's edification, not to muzzle anybody, but to just have the board speak in one voice when it's perceived that the board is speaking.
Right.
So, but let me ask you this. Are you comfortable with that language? Can we keep that language in there? Or do you have suggestions to change that specific language? And the reason I ask is because if we're good, if we can craft good language that we're comfortable with on this point, we can probably move to a vote to adopt these rules and regulations. If we can't come to the point where we can craft comfortable language on that point, we may not be able to take a vote today. And I think it would be great if we could vote on this. So if there's other language that would make you feel more comfortable, we can change it.
All just kind of restating the same thing in different language. I think everybody's kind of on the same page, right? I mean, we all want to be able to speak if we want or participate in events in our various jurisdictions, but we want to just be mindful that we're on a board and let people know. I mean, that's just kind of common sense.
Yeah, our mission statement and our goals, I mean, if somebody asks me, that's where I kind of go. Unless they really want, then I kind of go into it. People will ask, what are you doing? And our job's to make sure that sentence credits are given out fairly and with uniformity and with the safety of the public in mind. I mean, I keep it that simple. Usually that's all people want to know. I mean, it's there in the goals and the mission statement. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to keep something in there along these lines, but if we need to make the language a little bit different, we can do that. It'd be great if we could do that now. That way we could adopt these and have something more permanent. So do you have anything, Dr. Carpos, that you'd like to change?
Maybe a suggestion for the language. And I totally agree. It makes sense to try and keep this in it and be done with it. Board members shall confer and coordinate with the executive director prior to making or crafting public statements or comments I'm sorry, I lost my thought right there.
That's okay.
Making or comments that will be official board business statements or something like that.
constituting.
Something like that will constitute, or,
That could be construed as, or could be interpreted as,
Okay.
official board business.
Official
Yeah.
board business.
Yeah.
Do we want to keep or actions? Or do we want to take that out?
maybe that's just so broad. I don't know what that
Okay.
means. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I can make those changes if that's something everyone's happy with. Okay. Great. Okay. And then there's anything on the subcommittee chair portion? Okay, hearing none. There are some changes that need to be made, but I think the changes are discrete enough that they can be done if we'd like, and I'd like to move to adopt these roles and regulations with the changes we discussed. And then we can be done with that subcommittee's work.
I make the motion with the changes suggested and made by the executive director today that we go ahead and adopt this job description and general information by the Roles and Responsibilities Committee.
A second.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Sounds unanimous. The motion is passed. We will adopt these disciplinary oversight board roles and responsibilities with the changes. And as those changes are made, I'll send them out so everybody can review them. But I appreciate everyone's work on that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, can we get an acknowledgement? Who was on that subcommittee? Who drafted these?
Chairman Frank.
Mr. Lee Frank,
Behind it,
Mr. Jerry Bassbinder, and Mr. Mike Dunn, correct? You also assisted? So I just want to say thank you to all of you. It was job well done, extremely. It's great.
Chairwoman.
Director Stahl was there to help with Mike.
Yes.
Quite the wordsmith as always, Mr. Starr.
That's
I had a
very
good
kind.
Thank you, gentlemen. I do appreciate your hard work on this.
That was a good 5-hour meeting too.
Well, I mean, you know what? This is good stuff. It really is. So I'm glad we were able to do that. Okay. I'd like to move on to the next agenda item if no one needs a break. Okay. The next one is the board guidelines subcommittee. That is after, in your packet, that is after Mr. Baisden's resume. So it begins, and it's a two-part packet. So the first 2 pages have to do with the goals, I believe. And then the next 3 pages is a procedural process. Now, these were crafted by the guideline subcommittee. And I believe that subcommittee consisted of Mike Dunn, Dr. Karpos, and Mr. Lindsay. And I think that was chaired by Dr. Karpos. So Dr. Karpos, if you want to walk through these documents for us, I think we'd be happy to talk about these. I think everyone has gotten these, right? Everyone's had a chance to look at these. We can talk through them quickly, or if you'd like, Dr. Karpos, we can just open it up to ideas that people have already made on their own sheets. Is there anything you want to say preliminarily, Dr. Karpos, about these?
Not really, other than, we have the benefit of several other board members and executive director and chair sitting in when we discussed these. And we had a very robust discussion. And there may clearly be some other items on here that may need further discussion. But the first 2 pages are numbered. They begin with mission statement, page 1, page 2 of the draft guidelines. And I would just open it up to the floor to anybody, Director Stahl, that would like to suggest changes or modifications, page 1 or page 2.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's start with the first 2 pages. Anyone have anything that they saw that they'd like, either substantive change or language change or additions, subtractions on those first 2 pages? We got the mission statement, I think, which has already been approved, and then goals, which I believe have already been approved. And then we've got the following insights and recommendations regarding the goals that have been listed as 1 through 10. Does anyone have anything?
I have a question about number 4. The second subsection, proposed measures that mitigate risks and enhance safety within correctional facilities. I think that might be outside,
Yeah, it's on.
that might be outside our statutory mandate.
And if I could just jump in behind her, because 2B and 3B, I have the same concerns.
Okay, well, let's start with 2B because that'll be first. So evaluate the potential impact of sentence credits on public safety, taking into account the risks associated with inmate releases. We have some concern about that being outside the statutory limits. Is that right? Okay, so the option is to either change that to where we're more comfortable with the language or to eliminate it from subsection 2, from paragraph 2. What would everyone prefer?
Well, if I remember the discussion, and this definitely 2B was a robust discussion. One of the thoughts was we could just possibly strike everything after the comma and leave in evaluate the potential impact of sentence credits on public safety. And then there was another suggestion that possibly everything after the comma wouldn't be stricken, but rewarded in some way. But that we would open that up to all board members to see what their pleasure is on that.
All right, so that's the first idea, is to just take everything after the second comma and either eliminate it or keep it, but in different wording. How does everyone feel about that first part of that sentence? Public safety prioritization includes evaluating the potential impact of sentence credits on public safety.
My issue is when I raise that is that's a whole other ball of wax to me, right? To evaluate
We
for
talking about the first one or
2B.
the second? Okay.
2B. So evaluate the potential impact of sentence credits on public safety. That's a massive undertaking for me to sit and that's a lot of data. That's every judicial district,
I agree.
right? That's every how does
We're
it
really
impact
do.
Davidson, versus Shelby versus District 1, which is, that's where you are, Mr. Dunn, right? So which is much more rural and small and different, right? So I just, that's just a massive no. So I think that's outside of the scope of what we're supposed to be doing. And also we are incapable of doing it.
Okay, so
And in the second half that's the hard R evaluation. We don't have the capability to do that either.
okay, so I think the chairperson is saying she would rather just eliminate part 2B in total. How does everyone else feel about that?
I would agree. I think that the first subsection really covers what our role is. Or, maybe I should say our goal. It's not necessarily our role, but I think it comes in to why the board was created in the first place.
Well, I'll say this. So from what I'm hearing is I think we can eliminate part 2B. The other option is if we have subcommittee members who feel strongly that, and we don't have one of the subcommittee members here, which isn't easy, but if the subcommittee members who are here feel strongly that they would like to include that in there, we can send this back to the subcommittee and see if they can craft more limited language with regard to public safety. But if the subcommittee members aren't married to part 2B, then I think we can just strike it.
I think a saving point of, if we were going to keep 2B in there, would be just to change or add this particular part to it to narrow the scope. And it would read, evaluate the potential impact of the sentence credit in question. That would put it on a case-by-case basis that we are already looking at.
But, and I hear you, and I know where you're coming from, but I don't think it's our job to weigh a sentence credit against the risk, the risk of public safety. Under the statute, and my understanding from my appointing authority was that we are merely to evaluate if the sentence credit was given in accordance with guidelines, regulations, statute.
So you.
right, policy, but not to weigh, like, if, and I hate to say it, right, but if you've got a guy who, he's probably gonna reoffend, right? The risk to public safety is high, giving him those sentence credits, right? But if he's earning them legitimately, we don't, I mean, yes, public safety is our concern
Sure,
because we want it to be done right.
I understand.
But using that as, like, I feel like it
So we're
could twist
drifting into
it.
the role of Tennessee Board of Parole instead of our, that's for the.
Ah, yes, Mr. Dunn, that's very well put. Thank you.
That's for the.
Yes.
All right, very good.
Okay. So, yeah, from this side of the room, is there
Gotcha.
anything?
So if I may, it's my understanding that the fundamental perspective bringing the board into being was organized around questions related to how or if sentence credits are being applied because someone actually is earning them, or they're just automatically being applied. And so, in keeping that perspective of public safety and thinking about, perhaps this is one way to think about it. I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for the subcommittee. One perspective would be that we're going to in some way assist in the management of behavior by looking at sentence credits, either the awarding or the withdrawing, as a way to shape the management of offenders, which is not a perspective that I personally hold. Another perspective would be that we exist as an autonomous board to evaluate the awarding, denying, and withdrawing of sentence credits. And that we're doing that for the sake of public safety, with the understanding that if people are awarded sentence credits, it does in fact translate to earlier being released earlier from incarceration. And because we are familiar with the brutal case of Eliza Fletcher and the role that that conversation played in the creation of this board, I think it would be, what's the word that I want? I just feel that in that perspective, it's important for the board to maybe not use the word evaluate, use the word consider, if that's a better word, but consider the potential impact of sentence credits on public safety. Because sentence credits absolutely translate to when the door opens.
Yeah, I think a lot of that makes sense. I have not heard from Jerry and Lee. Do you guys have any points on this particular issue you'd like to raise? What I'm hearing is I think maybe it would be best, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go on to the rest of the list, revisit this part 2 again, and where we may end up is sending at least that part back to the subcommittee for consideration on inclusion in general or elimination of 2B, or rewording it. But I think we'll have to get to that point. But let's take a look at this is great, but it may be a longer discussion than we have time for on our agenda right now. So let's see if there's more on this particular proposal that we can address, and then we'll come back to part 2 if there's no objections to that. And I think Betsy, you had something on 4B you wanted to discuss, is that right?
Yes, kind of along the same arguments. Like, I think all these are worthy goals. I just don't think that they are why we were created, what the statute says we're supposed to be doing. And I don't think we have necessarily the ability to do that. It states proposed measures that mitigate risks and enhance safety within correctional facilities. I just feel like that's outside our scope of talent and mission.
The common language there between 2B and 4B seem to be the words risks and safety. And 3B as well. We have a comment on 3B. Recommend mechanisms to enhance transparency in the decision-making process for granting or denying sentence credits. Does that go back to safety for you?
I was just sitting here thinking like proposed measures. I mean, this moves into really legislative action. I think as we get going, I think just naturally, we're going to find issues that we'll go to our appointing authorities and say, I mean, we're citizens. I can talk to McNally or call the governors, you know, I probably won't get the governor, but I can call his staff. Or as a board, we'll say, you know, we're finding out that this isn't working throughout the prison system. I think we will just organically that will happen. Do you not think that might happen somewhere down the line that,
I agree.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like we're finding this is happening in all the prisons, you know, it's just constant. I don't know.
I mean, like I said, I think none of these are offensive. I think these are great ideas. I just think that maybe they're not our job. I don't mean that like, oh, I don't want to be burdened by it. Like, I don't think we have the ability to affect that change, whether it's talking to TDOC to have them change their policies or talking to the legislature to have them enact statutes. I certainly think we can participate in those discussions or bring them to light. I just don't think it should be in our policies.
Okay, I think those are all
That's my
good
point.
points.
I mean, that's, yeah.
Do we have anything on the second page that also jumps out to us as problematic?
Okay.
Can you elucidate on number 6, please? The evidence-based recommendation. What's your intention with that? Subcommittee.
I
or
think that's
subcommittee chair?
either of the subcommittee members or the subcommittee chair.
Mhm.
Point 6.
Just basically the assumption that whatever recommendations we would make wouldn't be made on the basis of opinion. That the recommendations would be based in some sort of foundation, whether it be data, research, you know, that it would be what we're stating here as our guidelines. And what we would be working together as a board is not to create a compilation of our opinions, but a compilation of information that's grounded in some source.
I'm sorry, I need to probably elucidate. Recommendations for what? That's what I'm asking. Like the evidence-based recommendation for policy change, recommendation for TDOC to do something better, recommendation for what are we recommending?
Okay, so the mission statement, and this is what we're working off of. The board is committed to delivering insights and recommendations that may enhance correctional policies, ensuring decisions regarding inmate sentence credits are grounded in principles of fairness, accountability, and public safety. So that's our reference point for recommendations.
And that's
I just,
helpful. I
yeah,
think.
yeah, it is helpful. It's the second, so it's 6B. I think that just takes it that half a step too far. 6A, right? on empirical evidence and data-driven analysis. So that's the information that's in front of us, right? That we compile doing the work that we're doing. 6B, were potential impact on correctional outcomes, inmate rehabilitation, and public safety. I think we just take a half a step outside our box. So I'd same, not as strongly, but same concerns with 6B as with 2B, 3B, and 4B.
Okay.
Would it be reasonable to consider on 6B, because I'm clearly here, the concern, their potential impact on public safety? And strike everything between on and public safety.
Again, I'm still like, it's that same parole board analysis that Mr. Dunn used. It's just a half a step outside of what we're doing for me. If, if there's anybody else that feels differently, or with Dr. Carpos's suggested edits, I'm just one. So if there's anybody else that feels differently, please speak up.
I guess my question is, and I'm having trouble trying to say what I'm thinking. I feel like our job is to look at all the facilities, look at all the data, and figure out where there are inconsistencies or where we have problems with credit given or credit not given, not with researching this stuff. So my hang up is the support recommendations with research. I don't feel like that's where we're supposed to be coming from, but am I misunderstanding what this says?
I think that means that any of our recommendations would be supported by evidence of our research. And we could just keep it
What we
at
look,
we've
what we
done.
find in.
This is how we came to that decision, because we found here, this is wrong, or this is missing, or whatever the case is. He didn't earn these, or he was awarded these for nothing, or whatever the situation. And that would just be supported by the research we found.
Well, would that not fall under 2A?
Good.
Right? I think,
Correct.
is it encompassed within 2A, what you're
Correct.
describing? Yeah, maybe. Anybody else?
Just gonna, what Mary's talking about doing, like 10B, consider constitutional rights, legal precedents, and ethical guidelines when developing and proposing changes. I don't know if our board, that's almost like we have been given by the legislature to do a fact-finding board that we dig into TDOC. And is that what we're about? I don't know if that's our job. Do you see what I mean? That's moving our job level up to, we're finding out what's wrong, and we're here to change how they're giving out credits I think it kind of looks at our job, either we're to make sure they're fair and equitable, how they're handing out credits, and that they're following their policies, or we're doing something more. We've moved up a notch into reporting back or to push policy change. Is that our job, to push policy change, or is it to make sure credits are being given out? I think that's kind of what we're debating here. What's our mission? Is it change, or is it compliance? We're making them comply, we're auditing them, or we're saying we're going to dig in and find out what needs to be taken legislatively to be changed. And maybe that's where some are wanting to go. I think that's all these, A's are always pretty consistent with but B's usually move into action on all these 10 steps. It's like moves into a different realm. I don't know. That's my feel.
Well, here's what I'm hearing. I think there's some alignment between what you're saying, Lee, and what Betsy's saying, and what Vanessa's saying, and what we're all kind of saying in terms of narrowing the scope of and understanding the scope of our job, and using the mission statement, which has been adopted, to create and craft, like you said, actions that we're going to do to accomplish that mission. There's a couple of different things here, and I do think this is an important conversation to have. Why don't we take this draft? I think the subcommittee members have heard from different members on the board about some of the things that they'd like to have redrafted, maybe narrowed in scope or whatever. And then they can meet again and take all of that into consideration. And then at the next public meeting, we can bring another draft, which is maybe a little bit narrower in its scope for
Sure.
what.
We'd like
what we're
Brother
looking to
Lindsley's
do.
feedback as well.
Does that,
Absolutely.
does that work for everybody?
Yes, sir.
Because I would like to get to the second draft that we have, and then we've still got to go over the policies subcommittee draft as well. So really, really good. And I'll let Vanessa talk, but I think that might be the best path forward for this particular, and that's the point of this. It's just a draft, right?
Sure.
We've heard from some people, we can take it back, we can adjust, we can use it as clay.
I think our focus that day was, we know the board was created for public safety outcome. And we are not in a position to force changes, but recommend them to the right powers that be, whether it be the legislature in a report or the TDOC in a report. This is what we found. This isn't working right.
Yeah.
We're just bringing it up. That's our, and a recommendation, meaning it's a more of an advisement or a notice that we found these indiscrepancies or these things are not working correctly. And that's what an oversight board does. And as far as sentencing credits go, that's our focus.
Yeah, and building that into what we're drafting.
Sure.
Yeah.
But as far as recommending certain policies and things like that, we all agree that we're not in a position to force that. Throw a stick in somebody's spokes.
Vanessa, did you have some more?
Yeah, I just wanted to, so when the board when the subcommittee reconvenes. 7A, so in discussions about inmate sentence credits, I just feel like maybe we could just say in discussions about the board and about what we do, right? Engaging stakeholders in what we're doing, not necessarily specifically inmate sentence credits, but the Inmate Disciplinary Oversight Board. And then 7B, again, same issues. All of 8, same issues. 9A, same issues. And 9B, ensure that staff, who are staff? And then also 10B, I'm in concurrence with Mr. Frank on that one. So if the subcommittee could revisit those, and listening to everyone talk today, and I think, I've expressed some of it. Ms. Wiseman has as well, Mr. Frank has, Dr. Carpos and Brother Dunn have all expressed some type of definition of what it is we think we do here, right? We need to have a discussion, I think, on that, on what it is exactly that it is we think we do here, right?
Sure.
Because I'm hearing part collective voice, but I'm also hearing some outlying stuff that is differentiating between individual members of the board. So we need to probably also have that discussion as well. Mr. Stahl, make a note.
I was gonna say one last thing. What these are noble things, and I think we'll get to some of these. I really do. Like 10 though, I keep going back to 10B. When developing and proposing changes that's got us absolutely saying, we're coming to change some of what you're doing. After we study this for a year or two, we're gonna make recommendations to change, I don't know, overhaul the whole sentence thing. That gives me a little bit of heartburn, just that's moving into like really, like TDOC, we're gonna tell you exactly how you're screwing up, and maybe it leads to that. But I don't know if that's us or if that's going to people that actually vote, the legislator,
Sure.
the governor.
And in closing, well, just for that section, I do want to thank, Dr. Carpos,
Yeah.
Brother Dunn, Mr. Lindsay, who isn't with us, for putting in the work and meeting and making the time to put this together, because it's a difficult task. And also, I do want to say, I really like that last paragraph. These guidelines aim, I think that's actually pretty good. I really like it.
Right.
Mind reading that for the folks at home?
Yeah.
Oh,
Your mic's.
I would love to read that for the folks at home since I love it so much. These guidelines aim to support the mission of enhancing correctional policies in Tennessee regarding inmate sentence credits while aligning with the goals of fairness, accountability, public safety, and protection of inmates and staff. They emphasize the importance of evidence-based decision-making, stakeholder involvement, transparency, and consistency in policy implementation and evaluation. The reason I like this so much is it hits all of those key points, but I think it's an overarching umbrella. It's not locking us into doing any of the things that some of the board members have said perhaps are outside of our box. And it's very well said. So I did like that.
Maybe we should put that at the beginning, not the end.
Okay, let me pose this to the subcommittee chair. This second document, is it dependent on the first? Or can we talk about it today, or do we need to wait until the revisions for the first document and then address the second document? What do you think?
So just a statement about the first document. This was our attempt to kind of put everything possible on the table. And I'm delighted to hear that people have given careful consideration to how this may or may not align with the vision for the board. And so it was not an attempt by the subcommittee to say, this is what it should be. We just wanted to give voice to all possibilities. And having a further discussion and an opportunity to bring it back at the next public meeting and have it be clearly aligned with what the board vision is would be optimal. Now, with regard to whether or not this second document would be something we discussed today, this, I would be inclined to say, at least preliminarily, just like we just preliminarily discussed this, because Mike Dunn did bring up 4 very important questions with regard to how this would lead us procedurally down the road. And from the agenda, I see that we have items that are procedurally down the road. So it seems like it would be beneficial to at least look at these and consider, do they fit with what board members view as what the board is to do or not do. But Mike, I would ask you to lead us through those 4 questions that you posed.
Sure.
And then we can maybe dive into some of the procedure documentation if that seems appropriate. Thank you.
Sure. And I'll keep this simple for time's sake. And we've been over it in one of our previous online meetings.
Don't feel rushed. We have time. We have
Okay.
more than enough time.
Yeah.
But this is kind of, to steal Vanessa's word, an umbrella for covering our mission here, because we're specifically looking at sentence credits. So I thought it falls into pretty much 4 groups. And the first one being, was the sentence credit awarded justified? Did they earn it? Was it appropriate? Second, should there have been good credit awarded that was not awarded? Are they missing some that they did earn, or they participated in something, a certification of some sort where, you know, they're supposed to be awarded this, and once they've reached that point, it's supposed to be awarded. So that type of thing, because there could be an instance of somebody being left out purposefully or inadvertently. Number 3, was the removal of credit justified? If somebody had good credit taken away, was that justified, and what's the reason? And was the reason there? And 4th, there it is, was the recommended credit from the warden or TDOC appropriate? Because in our statute, it talks about post recommendations from our board having a sentence credit either awarded or amended or adjusted, whatever, that addresses that aspect of it. Was the recommended credit either from the warden or TDOC appropriate? And we could evaluate all four of those in any inmate situation, providing we have the tools to do so.
Okay, great. Well, with that introduction, I think we can open it up a little bit to what everyone thinks, keeping in mind that these are broad. This is a very broad draft. And I think the subcommittee members would love to hear your thoughts on this particular draft, but they'll probably end up taking the first one and this one back and making some revisions. So what do we have? What are our thoughts maybe on Mr. Dunn's first question? Was the awarded credit justified? And there's some proposed procedures and documentation requirements associated with that. What do we think about what they have listed there?
How do we get that information? I like, no, so number two, I really like number two. I think that's, because if an inmate says, right, I was supposed to get some credit and I didn't,
Yes.
we are the outlet for that, right? And so number two makes a lot of sense to me. If we got a request from an inmate, but how are we getting number one? So
Check. I see a 423 number on the line. If you can press *6, let's see if that turns off your mute, or if you can drop and rejoin. Let's see if your mute and goes away and you're audible. You should be able to hear the room now in the call.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Wonderful.
Okay, that worked, whatever you did.
Okay, so did you just push *6?
I did.
Okay, great. I see a couple other people on the line. Is there a 931 number? So no, that's Dr. Carpos and, Okay. well, that's both Dr. Carpos. Are you,
I just lost you again.
yes, we muted our mic for a moment. You should be able to hear us now. We're just talking logistics here.
Yeah, there was one other guy on here that, at least when I got on, his name was Don
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah, Don
And,
Baisden. I'm gonna try to get him on again.
Okay,
Representative
he
Halsey.
hung up. He hung up when everything went dead there.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him a call, see if he can get back on with us here.
Okay, hey, I appreciate you doing all that. I'm not trying to be a thorn in your flesh.
No,
But,
No, I noticed it needed to be done, so I just couldn't get to it until, we took a break, but I appreciate your patience. You should just be able to use your own phone's mute option in your call, just to mute your mic when you're not speaking, so you should be all set.
well, I shouldn't be doing any speaking anyway, so I'll mute it anyhow, so.
Okay, well, thank you for testing.
Yeah,
Well, actually,
I'm just-
Representative Halsey, if we have a portion on the agenda for a public comment period, and I do think the board members would like to hear if you have some thoughts at the end of the meeting. So if you are able to stay on until that point and your microphone works, I do think we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, no problem at all.
Okay, great.
And you're gonna take up business again at 1:15 your time?
1:15. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, good deal. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. How'd you guys get it to work?
check one.